So welcome everyone to room one for the breakout rooms again. I'm going to flip over to my background again. My name is Chris Berry. I am the Zoom Jedi running the presentation today. So I'll be just watching the chat and making sure things are running right. I am the hypnotist in my chapter in South Alberta, a member for 6 years. And I am happy to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Rav Badial. Am I saying that name right? I want to make sure.
You are. Appreciate you asking.
Oh, and as I'm going to get your introduction, it just went and closed on me. Let me pull that up again real quick.
And while you do that, is everybody able to see the screen?
I can see the screen. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, perfect.
So it should be running fine. Again, Rav is going to be speaking today. And just a little bit about him before we get started. So Rav has been, there we go. Rav's journey in BNI started in about 2006 when he attempted his third attempt at launching a chapter finally launching his own chapter, BNI TNT. Over the course of a decade, he's taken on various leadership roles within the chapter and eventually joined the regional team as an ambassador and then a director consultant. Most recently, Rav and his sister became co-executive directors of BNI Ontario, Southwest, and Windsor, Chatham, Kent. Over the last few years, Rav's involvement within BNI has become larger and larger to the point where he has sold his financial planning practice to follow his new passion full-time as a 10+ year chapter member. He finds working with members much easier as he's personally been in most of the chapter roles himself. Rav is grateful that he's been able to do what he loves every day and be business partners with his sibling. He resides with his family in Cambridge, Ontario, and looks forward to spending many more years involved in BNI. So everyone, welcome Rav to the room as we begin his presentation. Rav, take.
Oh, I'm not sure if you muted yourself. Can anybody hear me? Thumbs up. I'm breaking rule number 1. Mark Simmons is looking at me as a Zoom Jedi going, Rav, don't do that.
You're good. I muted
Awesome.
myself, but you're going.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. So, you know what? I was excited to see the email for Moji yesterday that 700 people have registered for the events over the next couple of days. So absolutely phenomenal. It's really exciting to come off of John's session a few minutes ago, which is a great segue into some of the things I want to talk about. And the technical questions, I might lean on John for some guidance. This is going to be more the why. So it's going to be interactive. Chris, if you have some ability to just monitor the chat for me, I'm going to ask for some questions and answers to make sure everybody's still awake, and hopefully you can all give me some insight. So what I want to do today is share why I use the CRM and how it kept me sane. As Chris mentioned, 17 years as a financial planner. So as professionals and business owners yourselves, I'm sure you've all got a slew of things coming at you from 100 directions. John talked about a lot of them from a sales standpoint. As a financial planner, we had compliance issues. We had clients that wanted callbacks, industry changes that I wanted to touch base with a client about. And not only that, I was also trying to maintain my pipeline. So I was juggling 15 plates here and also wanted to make sure that I had sales queued up for next week, next month. And so what we're going to talk about today is a couple of strategies on how to leverage your CRMs to help you follow up, how to leverage your CRM to help increase your visibility and credibility within your chapter, and how to create a follow-up system that works for you. And I'll try to break it down to a nice 3 steps that I've learned along the way. And what I found ultimately was, we can use sticky notes, we can use Excel spreadsheets, but for me, automation and CRM was the only thing that kept me sane. So if you're a BNI member, you've probably heard the terminology. Is everybody here in BNI? Yeah, show of hands. All right, so know, like, and trust, right? If I meet Sarah, I'll get to know her. We'll find commonalities, we'll like each other. We may do business once or twice, but until that trust factor is built, I'm not gonna be able to refer to her steadily or receive referrals steadily. And so we really gotta work on that trust. That takes time. And so the number one thing for me was following up. So imagine, if you will, if you're at a chamber event, a business expo, a BNI meeting, and you meet John, you meet Mark, you meet Al. You get 3 or 4 cards. There's usually a couple of things you can do, right? So one way is you go back to your desk, you put them in a pile and say, I'll get to them when I can. Yes, we have some software that can scan the cards and put them into like Evernote, things like that. But that's usually the most common thing that happens. I'll get to it. I'll call them tomorrow. The second thing you can do is use your already allotted time to follow up with those 3 or 4 people, because you obviously had a target when you went in. So what I do personally before I even start this is whenever I register for an event, BNI, Expo, even today, these conferences, I've already set aside time for follow-ups. So you don't have to raise your hands, but my question to you, the first question is, how many here set aside time this Friday, 15 minutes, to follow up with people that we connected with in this conference? Sarah, I can see your hand. Awesome. Great job. We've got 700 people. I've been in, this is the third session. A lot of people dropping their contact info in, and so they want to get connected, right? And so if you haven't done that yet, I encourage you to set something aside for Friday or for Monday, set aside those 10 minutes and really do those touch points. The key here is to start forging those deep relationships, right? And so when we come back from those expos, some of you may be Excel ninjas. You may have formulas and macros and color coding. That's just not for me. Others may have sticky notes. So what kept me sane was taking those business cards, putting them right into my CRM, and working on solidifying my follow-up. Anybody here using spreadsheets or sticky notes? No? Okay, we're all automated. A couple people? All right. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. We got John on the call. John's going to help us out. Imagine, and so if we go back to those events, what I've also seen over time is the BNI meetings themselves. I made it a point to set aside 30 to 45 minutes after my BNI meeting, whether it's immediately after or the next day for follow-ups. Because how often do we hear somebody in their weekly presentation or their feature presentation that said something where we could have a one-to-one? So I'm going to pick on John because John, you're top of mind. You talked about Zapier. So if you mention that in a BNI meeting and I dash out the door, how many times do we see our Zoom calls just end at the 90th minute? Or when we're in person, everybody's gone, the room's emptied. And so the fortune is in the follow-up, as we say in BNI. And so I'd really lean on my CRM to log those follow-ups and schedule that call with John, Mark, Joe, so on and so forth. So again, when we get back to the Business Expo situation, I want to just put it out there. If you can throw it in the chat for me, Chris, if you can help me out. What information are you gathering? Of course, we're going to get somebody's name, right? So I'm going to see Scott at the Business Expo, after hours. I've got his card, whether I'm writing it on the back or just remembering. If you can drop in the chat, what other information is important to you that you're gathering? And I'll give it a second here. And Chris, if you can start rhyming them off.
Yeah, as soon as I see some, everyone start putting some examples. What sort of things do you gather? Email
Business
address.
Yep.
How to contact them. Grab it all. Phone number.
Awesome.
Business info. I guess what they do.
Yep. Wonderful. One of our fellow directors used to call it. She coined the term "spray and pray." So when you go to some events, you're coming back with 100 cards. So then I started to strategically look for 4 or 5 key contacts ahead of time that I wanted, because otherwise you're coming back with a deck of cards you don't know what to do with. And then there's a trap also where now people have a stack of cards and they're selling too soon. So I just met them. I haven't built that credibility yet. I don't trust them. And now I'm getting that sales pitch. So John did a great job. John, I'm throwing it back to you again, did a great job with CRMs. This is not fully encompassing. There are so many out there, but I use Nimble for a few reasons. But the CRM for me was key to keeping me sane. And so it created a system for me to engage, not only following up, but following through with people. And for me, my biggest fear was not doing what I said I was going to do. So again, I'm going to go to Sarah. If I met Sarah at the Business Expo and Sarah said, Rav, I'm interested in what you're discussing here. Can you call me next week? My biggest fear that kept me up at night, even as a financial planner in my former life, was not doing what I said I was going to do. And so using a CRM, we'll talk about some of the basic things that I track, but using a CRM for that follow through process was also key to the success that I had in BNI and also in my last profession. Because we have so many things coming at us, right? We have clients that want quotes, they want product changes, they're calling, they just have a question. If we're an insurance broker, they've got a policy request change and all these different things. And we're also trying to build our pipeline. We're just juggling too many plates. And so by having a CRM, it can be simple, it can be robust, like John discussed, is absolutely key especially with how fast. John, I think it was, what was it, 15 minutes? Was it you that said that? People want a response in 15 minutes. So within 15 minutes, I mean, if I got a spreadsheet or a sticky note, it's just not going to work for me. And so some of the things that I track, and I'll kind of go over it in the next slide as well, are their basic information that we talked about. So how I met somebody, name, address, business name, but I'm going to go into a few more details on the next slide. Before I do that, I think this will be nice for John as well. If you can drop this in the chat, could you kindly let us know, just out of curiosity, what you're using to manage your client interactions?
We saw one mention of HubSpot already, Zoho One, Dynamics, Salesforce, Keep, as was mentioned before.
Awesome. Everybody's on
campaign.
Everybody's on top of this. Yep. Wonderful. And so, and they can get really robust. And I was really intrigued by what our last presenter had mentioned. And so for me, what I do to tie it back is I look at the three things. It's for my follow-ups. So just to kind of, to bring this back to a point, follow-ups. So when I meet somebody like Logan, I want to follow up with them, touch base. It's following through. So if I give Logan some sort of commitment, I'll email him a quote. I'm going to email him some literature. I need to keep that basic thing for myself. And then the next one is going to be following back. So I use Nimble. If you haven't heard of it, that's okay. I mean, there's other ones that are probably superior to this. But for me, at Snapshot, there was a few things that were absolutely key. It links social media. For me, that's key. So when I add Chris Berry to my CRM, I can see his LinkedIn or Twitter handles. It's also going to import automatically that feed and his picture. Because I just met Chris and I forgot what he looked like. And I also met Mark and Joe and Faisy at the expo. I need to know who's who. So again, it's the social media handles, the picture, contact info, of course. It integrates with my email. So now I know all the interactions. Because for me personally, following back with Logan, I might trip myself up. I may say, Logan, nice to meet you. And he's to say, Rav, what do you mean? You emailed me last week. And that's just, again, I get sort of, sometimes there's just a lot going on. So those interactions, I can also schedule my follow-ups. So for me, it was my calendar of touch points. And so following back for me is absolutely key. If Mark Simmons said, you know what, Rav, I'm not ready right now. I'm ready. Call me in a month. I can go to my calendar, my Outlook or Gmail, schedule it. I can use a paper diary. But for me personally, I want to be able to open my CRM and it says, Rav, you got to call Mark together or tomorrow for this reason. And then once I call Mark, we can lean on John from our last session and start building an automation, right? And get that information that he wants, because that just blew my mind. There was anybody in Al's LinkedIn session? I think it was running a few minutes ago. Okay, Al's a phenomenal LinkedIn pro, so I'm not going to claim to be at his level, but he taught me a few things that I've been using really well, and it ties in with Ivan Meisner's 24/7/30 strategy. And so when I follow up on LinkedIn, I'll send the initial connection to Sarah. I'll add in a note, personalize it, send that connection request. And then as soon as I do that, I'm putting it into my CRM, because too often people are, well, if I don't ask, I don't get. That's the attitude on LinkedIn, right? How many are getting requests for like complete your MBA course or whatever the case may be? And it's just going in, I think Ivan Meisner called it premature solicitation. And so with that, I log it on the CRM. And then if Sarah accepts me, a week later, I've logged in my next follow-up, right? That's my follow-up point. And I'll reach back to Sarah saying, Sarah, thank you for connecting. I'd love to get to know more about your business. Do you want to set up a one-to-one, or that might be the wrong terminology? Do you want to set up a call where I can learn more about what you do? And I'm being genuine about it. I'm not trying to pigeonhole my widgets to sell to her. And then again, the last point there, if we can chat and she's open to it, I'm inviting her out to a BNI meeting. Like, how good is that going to look? Because now Sarah's told me about her business, and I'm going to introduce her to the 30 or 40 people in my team where she can showcase her business that much more. But the key here is, for me, if we're prospecting online, we got to keep ourselves straight so we don't trip ourselves up. I'm leaning on my CRM. And then it's also going back to the scheduling points of touch points, follow-ups, follow-backs. I mentioned fortune in the follow-up. Also, the gentleman's name, I didn't coin the follow-up, follow-back, follow-through. Anybody heard of Ryan Serhant, who's on the $1 Million Listing New York? That's from his book. So I'm not trying to claim any creative rights to that. It's a great book. He created that strategy. So again, even for BNI members, one of the things I always noticed was if we're a visitor host or on the leadership team, BNI, the mobile app and the website are phenomenal. They're getting better, but they're not quite CRMs yet. So even if people come to our chapter and they're there to meet people and they're visitors, I'd still log into my CRM to send a thank you to Chris. Didn't want to be too aggressive. I want to be mindful of GDPR. I don't want to be spamming people, but I really did want to have that touch point to Chris as a member of that chapter. And so many times that would have me stand apart, and I would be able to build that rapport and build that key relationship with somebody. And oftentimes in the chapters that I used to manage and oversee, we'd have visitors and members would run out the door and they'd just be, I'm busy, I'll figure it out. And so I made a key point to log that key information into my CRM. And I think it goes a long way with the visibility, credibility, profitability. If we've heard those words, which I hope we all have, right? The following up keeps us visible. The following through helps build our credibility. And then we're working towards profitability on that continuum. And so we don't have to use Nimble. John went through some really robust technology. For me, it's just keeping those small key elements tracked somewhere with scheduling and reminders to keep us on our toes and to forge those deeper relationships. So that's sort of it for me. I know it's a little short and sweet, but it was those three things. And I'll just say it one more time to wrap it up. Oh, and this credit to Colin Horner here, another BNI member. The follow-up, follow-back, follow-through, that is what I was looking for in a CRM. And I know from our previous session that we can build them. So if we find something that works, we can always scale it to what we need. I think we have a few minutes for questions, Chris. I'm not sure if there were any. I know I tried to keep it nimble here. No pun intended.
I didn't see a whole lot of questions, but obviously we've got time for them. So
yeah,
if anyone's got questions, feel free to ask them.
And you know, I'm going to be, I think, Sarah, I saw your hand there, and I'm going to lean on John as well. So if there's any tech questions, John, I might put you on the spot if I need help. Sarah, was that a question or was that just a wave?
No, I have a question. So getting a CRM for my company has been something I've been thinking about for a long time, and I've been starting to do my research. Quite frankly, it's overwhelming. I don't know if anybody else feels that way when they're looking at this stuff, but out of all of them, like I know you were mentioning Nimble, what other ones are there out there? And then I know your slide, you went through it, so I didn't get to see it.
So I'll probably defer to a little bit to John here. There's quite a few. For me, I looked at so I had Nimble, Zoho, HubSpot, Pipedrive. I mean, there's probably dozens and dozens. So the first thing, Sarah, and it'll go back to John, is what you're looking at tracking and storing, right? That's what I looked at personally. I went to Nimble because I'm working on a lot of launches. So I don't want to get into too much BNI stuff, but it was some of the stuff that John talked about with deals. And so for me, the deal portion was big. I'm a heavy Google user, and I really wanted the integration. And it's very creepy, but I was also looking at email tracking, and that's why I went to Nimble, because on launch, so we're launching BNI chapters, I kind of wanted to see who was looking at the emails and what they were doing to click. And so at that time, it may have changed. Nimble worked out well for me. So John, I'll flip it to you. If I'm coming to you and I'm looking at a CRM, are there certain questions that you'd be asking or that I should be thinking about before I pick a product?
Yeah, I mean, you have to identify what's important to you for sure. I know the connection with LinkedIn was a strong one for you. Nimble does that very, very high level. So Nimble is a great one. If you're looking for like Zoho, I'm looking here. Zoho is a great one too. It's not super user friendly. The problem is they've got all these different apps that you can plug in to make it all work together, but they're all independent, right? So getting to know all the different software platforms, even though it's one company, it can be a little confusing. HubSpot's, it's a good one. Keep's a good one. Active Campaign was mentioned in the chat here. That's a great one, actually. That I am a big fan of Active Campaign as well. So yeah, there's some really good ones. Again, just kind of figuring out, go through them and see if it's something that you can learn quickly. Because if there's a steep learning curve, you don't want to get into it, right? It's just going to be a nightmare for everything that you try to do. So yeah, I mean, if it's user friendliness is very important. I put that right up there with anything, because they all have similar functionality.
And that's key right there, John, that last portion. Thank you, John, for that insight. So Sarah, I actually used 2 or 3, and another BNI member advised me to do that. I didn't go into them too in depth, but I used the trial periods. They offer 30-day trials. And I went through 2 or 3, and I found that for what I was using for launching chapters in BNI, Nimble worked really well. But I'm sure there's other ones that are, great, if not more superior. So I'm
launching chapters too. So, I'm trying to think that, but with my own company, like I have a marketing company, advertising company. So I'm looking for something that I can onboard my clients, and then, say, this is the form that you need to fill out for me. But I want it to be all automated, because quite frankly, there is not enough time in the day for do everything that I need to get done. So anyway, and that's why, John, I set the one-to-one up with you, because any way I could funnel it down to make my life easier, give me back time, that's what I'm going for.
There you go. So you can set up a Calendly with John, and he'll get you on your way, or whatever the service you guys use to schedule.
Yeah, I might do the same thing, because Sarah, I'm in not the same boat, but we have our electrical company and we use Jobber. But then I have my stuff that I do with BNI, and it's how do I leverage, my exporting out of Jobber to manage that client list? How do I deal with, the referral marketing and stuff with BNI? How do I manage, is that 2 separate things, or can I find someone that will allow me to keep it separate within a system?
Sounds like we need a deeper session with John at some point. Hey, like a group tech session. Yeah. So but that's great, especially when we have so much involvement in BNI and then we have our businesses. That's a great point. And sometimes it seems like we're juggling 2 different contact databases. And yeah, I found what works for me, and it might not be the most efficient, and I'm sure I'm gonna have to change at some point, but it's going through, for me, it was going through those trials. And the 3 things, not to mention them again, but it was the follow up, follow through, follow back, especially for launch. If we're following up with people, and automation is huge. So now John's piqued my interest about Zapier, but those 3 things were key for me, and I needed to stay on top of that. So thanks for that question, Deb. Anybody else at all?
We have a quick question from Mylene. She posted a link in the chat there and was just asking about what I guess might be some low-cost solutions for CRM. I didn't click the link myself. Maybe she can speak for herself instead, but maybe she was asking for your opinion on some other technologies, or maybe some options for people with less of.
I don't know if there's any. I don't know what the cost of all of them are. They seem to be in the teens dollars per month. But again, I'm going to go back to John's point. Can we put a price on it? So when I invested in Calendly, I was like $8 US a month or whatever it was. I was like, ooh. But if it saves one person trying to schedule an appointment and there's 5 emails back and forth, it's paid for itself. And so I think, just as a point to try to answer that question, Nimble is around $20 US a month. I'm not sure if they're all in that range, but I didn't find anything that was free that would integrate, because they're going to limit you, right? So they might let you schedule and add 100 contacts, but when you start integrating with Gmail and your other, like Microsoft 365, I think that's where they're going to want you to get a subscription plan for the most part.
I think we can probably agree that as business owners, that for what you get from a CRM, $20 a month is probably one of your lowest bills. So
yeah, it is. And I'm glad that, again, I reiterate everything John said. It was as a financial planning business owner for 17 years, and now a BNI business owner, it was the base of everything. And essentially it's what I click on every day to see. And I think Megan Chitwood, if anybody was in her session, income producing activities. And so it's keeping me, instead of getting lost in the weeds of shuffling paper, you can set the parameters and focus on those activities that produce an income for you, and automate the stuff that's not generating you an income, shuffling paper.
repeating a question that actually John got during his session, is this something that you can help people get started with, or are you just kind of leaving that behind and focusing more on BNI now?
This was something that I've spoken to other directors about the importance of, especially for launch. So I'm happy to help as a giver's gain, but I do not have the technical expertise anywhere even close to what John has. And so I'm happy to connect you with John, because I think that's what he does. That's his wheelhouse. But if it's from a giver's gain and you want some insight from me, I'm more than happy to chat, because we have talked to other directors across the country on what they're using to automate their processes. Yeah. So I'm, as an executive director, I'm just here to support you all. I appreciate you all being here today, and what a phenomenal conference for day number 1, and look forward to connecting. My email is I'll drop it in the chat. If you ever want a one-to-one, feel free to reach out. Happy to chat with you. I'll put it in the chat and we can connect, and add me to social media if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rav. I can appreciate, as someone who actually comes from a background in computer programming, there's a lot of people out there in business that aren't necessarily tech savvy about this stuff. So if it does seem overwhelming, like he said, feel free to reach out to him. Feel free to reach out to John. Feel free to reach out to someone else in your region who handles that stuff. It'll be a real easy referral for you. And I'm sure once you get things going, it'll very much pay dividends with all this automation and CRM and what have you. So thank you again for that.
Thanks, everybody.
And thank you,
Have
John,
a great
as well.
conference.